$205,000. That's what the median American worker has saved by age 55. And the number financial planners say you actually need is closer to 1.6 million. That gap doesn't come from low income. It doesn't come from bad markets or bad timing. It comes from one specific mechanical error, and the people who avoided it didn't earn more, didn't get lucky, and didn't pick the right stocks. They just redirected a small fixed amount early enough that the math eventually took over. That amount is $525 a month. Not money you don't have. Money you're already spending on things that disappear without a trace. One unused subscription. A few restaurant meals a month cooked at home instead. A phone plan 1 tier cheaper. That's the number. And when you redirect it into a single low-cost index fund and leave it alone, something unusual begins to happen at a very specific point in time. The money stops depending on you. It starts to outpace you. And by year 25, the market has contributed more to that account than every dollar you ever personally deposited. Today we're walking through exactly how that plays out, year by year and number by number. You'll see the precise moment annual investment gains first surpass what you're putting in. The single year the portfolio permanently flips into self-sustaining mode, and why most people quit 3 years before any of this becomes visible to them. Meet David. He's 32. He finds his $525 without earning a single dollar more by quietly rerouting what was already leaving his account. One subscription cut, one weekly habit slightly adjusted. He opens an S&P 500 index fund, sets up automatic monthly deposits, and lets the clock run. If this kind of financial breakdown is useful to you, subscribing takes one tap and keeps the next one in your feed. In year 1, David contributes $6,300 of his own money. The market returns $232 on top of that. Not $2,000. Not even $500. $232, roughly the cost of a car registration. He opens the app, sees the number, and feels nothing. There are no fireworks. The account looks almost exactly like a savings account that barely moves. He starts doing the math in his head and wondering if this was worth the sacrifice. By year 2, David has deposited $12,600. His account sits at $13,536. Total market gains over 2 full years come to $936. That's less than 1 month of contributions earned across 24 months of patience. Nothing about that number feels motivating. The orchard is still just dirt, and the people around him are upgrading their lives in visible, immediate ways. This is where the first real threat enters, and it has nothing to do with market volatility. It's 2 quiet forces that work together over time with brutal efficiency. The first is inflation, running at roughly 3% per year, silently eroding the purchasing power of every dollar David doesn't deploy. The second is lifestyle creep, the natural human tendency to absorb every raise, every bonus, and every windfall into a slightly larger version of your current life. A better apartment, a newer car, a grocery cart that gradually fills with different things. Neither of these forces announces itself. They simply work in the background, and together they explain why the average 55-year-old has $205,000 saved when the actual retirement target sits around $1.6 million. The money was earned. It just never stayed long enough to compound. By year 5, David has put in $31,500 of his own money. His account has grown to $37,590. Total market gains over 5 years come to about $6,090. 5 years of discipline, and the market has returned less than 1 year's worth of contributions. This is the psychological wall. His friends are posting vacation photos. They're leasing vehicles that David could technically afford. The portfolio on his screen has no drama, no spike, No story to tell at a dinner table. He's not losing. He's not failing. The math is working exactly as it should. He just can't feel it yet because the compounding engine hasn't built enough mass to move the needle at a speed human emotion can register. Year 5 is the year most people exit. They sell. They take the small gain, fold it into a vacation or a down payment on something tangible, and they walk away from the only mechanism that would have eventually made them financially independent. What David does next is the only decision that separates him from 95% of the people who started this exact same journey at 32. He stays. He keeps the automatic deposit running and stops looking at the balance every week. That single behavioral decision is worth more than any market prediction or stock tip he will ever receive. In year 6, something quietly shifts. David has contributed $37,800. His account now sits at $47,449. The market added roughly $4,620 to his account in that single year. That is more than the market gave him in the entire first year and the entire second year combined. Something is moving. The engine is warming up, even if the numbers still don't feel dramatic on a Tuesday morning when he checks his phone. And this is precisely the year that roughly 60% of investors tap out. Not because anything went wrong, because nothing went spectacularly right. They look at the account, do the math, and decide the return isn't worth the restraint. They sell, they spend, and they rejoin the majority of Americans who will spend the next 2 decades working harder and harder while their money sits in a checking account doing almost nothing. The mechanical reason for this is straightforward and worth understanding clearly. 7% of a small number is a small number. 7% of a large number is a large number. As the principal grows, the percentage stays fixed, but the dollar output accelerates. There is no trick here, no special condition required. The math simply needs enough mass to produce meaningful output, and David has spent 7 years quietly building that mass while most people around him were spending theirs. By year 10, David has contributed $63,000 of his own money across a decade of automatic deposits. His account stands at $90,869. The market handed him approximately $6,364 in that single year alone, essentially matching his entire annual contribution dollar for dollar. David is 42 years old. He has never picked a single stock, never timed a single market move, never watched a financial news channel with any urgency. He bought one index fund, automated the deposit, and let 10 years pass. The orchard is no longer just growing. It is beginning to produce at the same rate David plants. The crossover hasn't arrived yet, but the distance between his contribution line and his growth line is now shrinking every single year, and it will never reverse direction again. Between years 10 and 15, the entire emotional texture of investing changes. For the first decade, every market swing carried weight. A good month felt like validation. A bad quarter felt like a warning. David checked the account more than he should have, and every time he did, his brain ran an involuntary cost-benefit calculation. The patience required to stay still felt like effort, because it was effort. Around year 12, that friction quietly disappears. Checking the account stops being emotionally charged and starts being boring. The numbers just keep moving upward, slowly, and then a little less slowly. There is no spike to celebrate and no crisis to manage. The portfolio has shifted from contribution-driven to compound-driven, and compound doesn't need David's emotional involvement. It just runs. Boredom, in this context, is not a warning sign. It is the cleanest possible signal that the system is working. In year 12, David crosses 6 figures for the first time. His account hits $117,051. He has contributed $75,600 of his own money. The market has given him roughly $41,451 that he never earned, never worked for, and never asked for. He just didn't interrupt the process. By year 15, David has contributed $94,500 across 180 monthly deposits. His account stands at $163,366. His annual market gain that year alone reaches approximately $11,465. His annual contribution is $6,300. The market is now handing him nearly twice what he puts in every single year. The orchard is producing more than David is planting. Most people watching a number like that expect to feel something dramatic. A transformation, a celebration, a clear before and after. What David actually feels is quiet satisfaction, the kind that comes from watching a long-running process finally reveal its shape. He is 47 years old. He has never deviated from the plan. He has survived 2 recessions, multiple stretches of flat markets, and several years where his friends' real estate investments or individual stock picks appeared to be outperforming everything he owned. He stayed in the index fund. He kept the deposits automated. He let 15 years pass without making a single clever move. The next milestone in David's timeline is not a round number or a new account balance. It is a specific structural event that most people never reach, and fewer still recognize when it arrives. It is the year his portfolio growth permanently and decisively outpaces his own contributions, not just in a good market year, but as a durable mechanical reality that holds regardless of what happens next. In year 17, the event arrives. David has contributed $107,100 across 204 monthly deposits. His account sits at $199,810. His annual market gain that year comes to $14,063. His annual contribution is $6,300. For the first time in David's adult life, his money is earning more than twice what he puts in every single year, without any additional effort, without any change in strategy, and without him doing anything differently than he did at age 32. This is the crossover, not a metaphor, a mathematical threshold with a specific address in time. The portfolio has accumulated enough mass that its annual percentage return, in raw dollar terms, permanently outpaces David's human capacity to deposit. 7% of a large enough number will always beat a fixed monthly contribution. David has spent 17 years quietly building that number, to the point where the math takes over completely. What makes this moment structurally different from every milestone before, it is that it is permanent. Even if David stopped contributing today, the portfolio's growth would continue to exceed what he had been depositing annually. The engine no longer needs fuel from his paycheck to keep running. It is generating its own. From this point forward, every dollar David continues to add is acceleration on top of a system that has already reached self-sustaining velocity. Now, some of you are already running the crash scenario in your head, and that instinct is worth addressing directly. What happens if a 2008-style collapse hits in year 19 after David has spent 17 years building this? Does the orchard burn down? The answer is the opposite of what most people expect. When the market drops 30%, David's $525 buys 30% more shares than it did the month before. He is purchasing cheap inventory at scale, while everyone around him is panic selling. An investor who maintained consistent monthly contributions straight through the 2008 collapse recovered past their pre-crash trajectory within roughly 3 to 4 years, faster than the broad market index itself recovered, because their average cost per share had dropped dramatically during the downturn. A market crash is not a threat to David's strategy. It is a discount event for the account that was already winning. There is one threat that operates more quietly than any recession, and most investors never calculate it until it's too late. It doesn't show up as a red number on a bad market day. It shows up as a fraction of a percentage point on a fund's expense ratio, year after year, compounding in reverse, while your portfolio compounds forward. A fund charging 1% annually in management fees will quietly drain an amount equivalent to roughly 25% of a 30-year portfolio's ending value compared to a comparable fund charging 0.03%. The orchard grows. The fee skims from it continuously. And because the fee is expressed as a percentage rather than a dollar amount, most investors never feel it leaving. The fix is straightforward. VTI, VOO, or a low-cost target date retirement fund from a major provider. These instruments carry expense ratios near 0.03% annually. They track broad market indices without active management, without stock picking, and without the overhead that funds charging 10, 20, or 50 times more in fees are quietly extracting from their investors every single year. David chose one of these from the beginning. That single decision, made once at age 32, protected a meaningful fraction of his orchard for the entire 25-year run. By year 20, David has contributed $126,000. His account sits at $273,485. His annual market gain that year alone reaches $19,246. He is depositing $6,300 per year and receiving $19,246 back from the market in the same 12 months. That ratio, $3 returned for every $1 deposited, will only widen from here. By year 22, his account crosses $330,000. He hasn't changed his strategy, hasn't consulted a wealth manager, hasn't moved his money into anything more sophisticated than the same index fund he opened at 32. The compounding engine has done everything. David's only job across 22 years has been to not interfere with it. Which brings us to the practical architecture behind all of this. Because where the money sits matters almost as much as the consistency with which it is deposited. The account structure David used follows a specific sequence, and each layer serves a different function in protecting the orchard from the forces that would otherwise trim it back. The first layer is the employer match. If your workplace offers a 401k with any percentage match, that match is an immediate 100% return on the first portion of every dollar you contribute. A 3% employer match on a $63,000 salary means your employer adds roughly $1,890 to your account annually, money that requires zero market performance to appear. Bypassing this to invest elsewhere is the single most expensive financial decision most working Americans make, and they make it silently by simply never enrolling. The second layer is the HSA, the Health Savings Account, and it is the most structurally powerful savings vehicle in the American tax code. Contributions go in pre-tax, reducing your taxable income in the year you deposit. The money grows tax-free inside the account. Withdrawals for qualified medical expenses come out tax-free. That is 3 separate tax advantages on the same pool of money, a structure no other account in the tax code replicates. After age 65, the HSA converts to a de facto traditional IRA, allowing withdrawals for any purpose at ordinary income tax rates. Given that the average retired couple in the United States faces over $300,000 in out-of-pocket healthcare costs across retirement, an HSA that compounds tax-free for 25 years isn't a minor benefit. It is a structural necessity. The third layer completes the structure. A Roth IRA, or traditional IRA, sits above the HSA in terms of accessibility, but below it in terms of tax efficiency for most investors. The Roth version uses after-tax dollars on the way in and produces completely tax-free growth and tax-free withdrawals in retirement. The traditional version flips that structure, reducing taxable income now and deferring the tax bill until withdrawal. Which version makes more sense depends on whether your income tax rate is likely to be higher now or higher in retirement. What both versions share is the function David relied on most. They shield the compounding engine from the capital gains taxes that would otherwise trim the orchard every single year it grows. The sequence matters. Employer match first, because that is an unconditional return on investment that no market can replicate. HSA second for investors who qualify, because the triple tax structure is unmatched anywhere in the code. Roth or traditional IRA third to shelter the remaining growth from the IRS across the full compounding window. Together, these three layers form the structural protection around the orchard. The index fund generates the growth. The account structure keeps it. And $525 a month is the floor in David's example, not the ceiling. Every additional $100 per month added from the beginning contributes roughly another $85,000 to the 25-year total. The math scales in a direct and predictable way. Someone who starts at $200 a month and gradually increases contributions as income grows will not reach the same ending balance as David, but they will reach the crossover point. The threshold where annual market gains permanently exceed annual contributions is a function of time and consistency, not of starting with a dramatic number. There are three predictable friction points that derail most investors before they reach that threshold, and each one arrives on a fairly reliable schedule. The first hits around year 2 or 3. The math hasn't produced anything visually impressive. The account looks like a savings account with modest interest. Everyone around you appears to be living more expansively. This is the year 60% of investors exit. The fix is mechanical rather than motivational. Automate the contribution so it transfers before you see it. Remove the decision from your monthly routine entirely. You cannot be tempted by money that moves before you interact with it. The second friction point arrives during a market downturn, when watching a portfolio drop 20 or 30% triggers the same cortisol response as a physical threat. The rational response, which is to continue depositing and accumulate cheaper shares, feels deeply wrong in the moment. The fix is behavioral. Stop checking the account during the decline. The math is indifferent to your anxiety, and your anxiety is the only thing that can convert a temporary paper loss into a permanent realized one. The third friction point is subtler and more expensive than either of the first two. Every raise, every bonus, every income increase represents an opportunity to widen the contribution and accelerate the timeline. Lifestyle creep converts those opportunities into square footage and monthly payments instead. The entire architecture of David's result rests on the decision he made at 32 to redirect rather than upgrade, and that decision has to be actively renewed every time income grows. At age 57, after 25 years of $525 monthly deposits, David's account stands at $425,400. He has personally contributed $157,500 across 300 monthly transfers. The market contributed $267,900 on top of that. Money David never earned, never worked for, and never specifically requested. He did 37% of the work. The compounding engine did 63%. In year 25 alone, his account grew by approximately $28,550 in market gains. That is 4.5 times what he deposited in the same 12 months. Only 1 in 5 Americans at age 55 has $447,000 or more saved for retirement. David reached that threshold on $525 a month and nothing else. No inheritance, no business exit, no stock tips, no timing the market. The retirement gap in this country is not primarily an income problem. The median household income is sufficient to fund this exact strategy. It is a behavioral and structural problem. The money gets earned. It just never gets redirected into a system designed to multiply it. There is one objection worth addressing before closing, because it comes up every time these numbers are presented. $525 a month is not accessible to everyone, particularly early in a career when income is lower and expenses are proportionally heavier. That objection is valid, and the math accommodates it. Someone who starts at $150 a month at age 25 and increases contributions gradually as income grows will not reach David's exact ending balance, but they will reach the crossover point. The threshold where annual market gains permanently exceed annual contributions is a function of time and compounding mass, not of starting with a specific dramatic figure. The floor is whatever you can automate today. The ceiling is wherever your income eventually allows you to go. The retirement system most Americans grew up expecting no longer exists in its original form. Company pensions have largely disappeared. Social Security faces projected funding pressure that makes it unreliable as a sole retirement income source. What remains is the third leg of that stool, the personal investment account, which happens to be the only leg entirely within your control. David's strategy is not a workaround or an optimization. It is the primary mechanism now. For most working Americans, there is no backup. The switch is straightforward. Automate a fixed monthly amount into a low-cost, broad market index fund inside a tax-advantaged account. Capture the employer match first, if one is available. Maximize the HSA if you qualify. Let the contributions run without interruption through flat markets, volatile markets, and the 2 or 3 years at the beginning when the account looks exactly like it isn't working. Do not increase your lifestyle every time your income increases. Do not check the balance during a downturn with the intention of doing something about it. The math does not need your help. It needs your patience and your absence. David is not a financial archetype or an aspirational fantasy. He is the mechanical output of a fixed monthly input and 25 years of not interfering. The orchard does not require a gifted gardener. It requires someone who plants the seeds and walks away. If this breakdown changed the way you think about what your money is actually capable of, do me a favor and hit that like button. Every like tells YouTube to put this in front of someone who needs to see it. Subscribe and turn on notifications. We're publishing financial breakdowns and wealth strategy deep dives every single day, the numbers most people never sit down to actually run. Drop a comment right now and tell us where you're watching from. Are you in the United States, the United Kingdom, Canada, Australia, or somewhere else entirely? Our community spans the globe, and every person here is working through the same questions about how to build something durable with what they already have. Tell us where you are. Tell us what year of the journey you're in. Tell us if you've ever hit the wall at year 3 and walked away, or if you're still in it. We want to hear from you. Thank you for watching, and thank you for making sure these lessons reach the people who need them most.